It is a scary moment because you know that if you do not have this really hard conversation with a friend, a family member, a colleague, that the relationship may well be over. But here's the rub. You also know that having the conversation with the friend, the family member, or the colleague might actually also end the relationship. What do you do? Today I'm going to offer you my best advice on how you could use empathy and critical listening skills in a way to have that hard conversation and build a connection that was better than anything you had previously in the relationship. I'm Bob Bordone. I'm a senior fellow at Harvard Law School. I'm the founder and former director of Harvard Law School's Negotiation and Mediation Clinical Program, and I'm the founder and principal of the Cambridge Negotiation Institute. First, let me define what I mean by empathy for purposes of a hard conversation. Empathy is really understanding what their perspective is and the emotions embedded in that perspective, whether or not you agree with them or think it's reasonable or think a normal person would feel that way. Empathy is not sympathy. So what does empathy do for us in a challenging conversation? Well, research has shown that all human beings have a genuine interest in feeling appreciated, seen, and understood. Now, to be honest, most of us don't need to see empirical research to know that. Just think to yourself. In fact, in the comments below, write down a time in your life when you felt genuinely seen and understood and what that was like for you. Then think of a time when you felt invisible. Write that down as well. That difference probably is telling because all of us know the difference. We know what it feels like. And when we are in a conversation that is going to be really hard with somebody with whom we want to connect, the best way to do that is to express that empathy, to really see them, to appreciate them for who they are. Now, empathy is not something you do in a moment. It takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of commitment, and it takes a lot of authenticity. What it means is getting curious about what does the world look like from the perspective of the person with whom you are having this really hard conversation. And so what that means is before you can be genuinely empathic, you have to do a lot of work to get genuinely curious. I know that whenever someone is just mouthing the words, sounding like they care, it feels like they're trained. And when they feel trained, it actually makes me really angry. So if you are having trouble getting curious, here are some things I would suggest. Imagine yourself in a different role from the role you're in. For example, when I'm not feeling at all curious about the other side, I imagine that suddenly I've been hired by the New York Times, and my job is to deeply understand how this person thinks and sees the world. Suddenly, I start asking all these curious questions. Wow, say more about that. Wow, that must have been hard. Gosh, how challenging. Can you elaborate? My mind is on a different task, right? I'm trying to get all the information for the big article I'm going to write. But that shift actually gives me a genuine curiosity that then empowers my empathy. Now, for you, maybe the approach to that will be somewhat different, but find something to cultivate the curiosity. So related to this curiosity, but also somewhat different, is the importance of actually reflecting back and acknowledging the emotions you're hearing from them. By acknowledge, right, I don't necessarily mean agree with. I mean just show them that it is registered for you. But here's the second piece, and it's a piece that I think can be really hard for a lot of people, particularly if you're going into a difficult conversation where you're already feeling a bit vulnerable. And that is that You have to be willing to speak and share your own perspective, but you have to do it in an effective way. So here are some tools for that. 1, when you are sharing your own perspective, share it as your perspective. From my experience, here's my observation. Do that instead of saying, here is what happened, here is the truth, here is the right answer. Because we know it's much easier for people to hear something when it's described from their perspective than it is to hear as the truth. So when you are sharing your perspective, I want you to share more than just your sense of what happened. I want you to consider sharing how you feel. And the reason why is if you show some vulnerability, there's a fair likelihood that they will reciprocate that. Because reciprocity norms are deeply hardwired into human beings. One of the observations that I've had with respect to difficult conversations is that people often suffer from what I call a first mover problem. Both sides have all sorts of very strong emotions, but no one feels confident or safe enough to share them first. And so the act of sharing those emotions creates a space of connection and joining. The last thing I want to suggest to you when you're thinking about trying to connect through a difficult conversation is to consider what are the core identities of the other person that are meaningful to them, that they hold on to, that they are proud of. And when I'm trying to connect with them, I want to make sure of 2 things. 1, I want to avoid hitting any identity triggers that may be in play. So for example, if I'm having a conversation with a family member, let's say a sibling or a sister, and I think one of the things that my sister thinks about herself is that she is a loyal sister to me. I want to be really careful that as I share my perspective, I don't do anything that would make her think she is a disloyal sister. Because that's going to get a defensive kind of reaction. Instead, what I might want to do is think about some quality of her, some identity piece that I know she holds really dearly, and frame my feedback in a way that actually makes her feel like she's upholding that sense of herself. So I want to use the identity in a way to make her feel good about herself. So for example, if I know that she cares about being a loyal sister, but also a responsible employee, I might say something like, one of the things I really admired about the way you handled that situation over the holidays is how you just showed up for your coworkers. And that is so core to you. And gosh, I admire that. One of the things that was really hard for me is that you had to leave before dessert at the holidays. And I don't know how to reconcile that, but that's something I want to share with you. So what I've really done is try not to over-trigger the "you're a bad sister" piece. I'm giving her the feedback, but instead I'm holding up the identity that she really cares about. So the key takeaway here is that when I'm trying to build a connection, I want to think about what are the different identities that matter to this person. How can I avoid stepping on a negative identity trigger and use a positive one as a way to build connection? So let's keep building connection between us. Watch this next video, The Art of Persuasion for Professional Success. And before you go, do me a favor and subscribe to my channel, like this video, and ring the bell. Okay, it's not difficult to keep watching. Click, click.